Hey guys, Dr. Dex here. Today we have a bunch of Q&A stuff racked up and we want to get it off our plate. So we're shooting a video on questions and giving you some answers. I have them all right here on my cell phone. So I'm gonna read them off. Excuse the glasses. Gotta have them. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to click that subscribe button and hit the bell icon to be notified when we're putting out new content. All right, here we go. Installing the lights inside the Regal rail system. How difficult is it? It does take a little bit of time because the pins that you're connecting all the LEDs with are really small. So you gotta like take your time and make sure those connect. They are now including a piece of clear heat shrink for each one, so you can use a heat gun. And once you have all the lights on, here's my pro tip: make sure all three colors work before connecting the next set. That way, if you have any issues before you connect all the line and you only check it in white, you don't have to go back and go, oh, amber's not working or blue's not working or whatever. Just check each color each time to make sure that you have all three colors working before you go to your next line, and it makes it for a much simpler install. And then I always leave a little bit of a gap inside the post. Every time I go through the rail and into a post, I put a small dip just for expansion and contraction. That way those LEDs are never trying to pull apart. Here's one: back to basics, how to square a deck, find straight line for first board. So actually that's two questions. How to square a deck. I usually use a fold out square, a large one. I have a couple. You could use the 3-4-5 method. Usually if I'm going to use a 3-4-5 method to square up a deck, I'm using a 6-8-10 instead, which means you measure 6 feet this way, 8 feet this way, and then you should have 10 feet this way. But I also have a 24-foot aluminum plank that I use that I bring, and it's very straight. It's 2 inches by 6 inches, and it's aluminum, so you can carry it, and it's 24 feet long, so I can basically square up anything I need to. And then I use my Stanley fold-out square, which is about a 3 foot by 3 foot fold out square, and I put that up against the foundation or a straight line or whatever, and I use that to square things up. I can also use a Stabila LAR 180. I've done that before as well with lasers. It just depends on how accurate I need to be and what I'm trying to accomplish. Oh, and then as far as finding the straight line for your first board, we usually use a string line. We pin the ends and then we bring the center according to the string line, and that usually sets us up for success for the rest of the run of the decking. All right, here's a question that has to do with setting up lumber and especially joists when you're building a deck. So basically, once we have all of our joists down to the site or to our location, we usually grade all of our framing, which means we put all the boards, crown them up, and we stack them next to one another. I don't care if it's 10 boards or 60 boards or 100 boards. Whatever it is, everything's crowned up, and then we take a straight edge, like a 8-foot Stabila or a 6-foot Stabila, and we go like this over the top of the joist. And as long as we have everything on a flat set of bunks, we'll be able to tell which joist is the thickest out of all those joists. We pull that one, we label that number 1, then we find the next highest one, label that number 2, pull it out of the pile, condense the pile, and keep doing that until we're through all the joists. Then we have an easier time installing the joists because they're graded from thick to thin, numbered from 1 to whatever. So I can say, hey, keep number 1 and 2 because we're doing a double rim joist, or start running number 3 through 20 or whatever, from thick to thin, from right to left, or whatever the case may be. If I'm trying to create a little extra pitch in something, or if you want the deck to be thicker or thinner on one end, you can kind of play around with those joists because the variance could be up to a 1/2 inch in a unit of framing. Do you use a flat file on your cut edges? What's your finishing technique? I do 2 things. I either use a rasp, an 8-inch rasp. I get them at the Home Depot or Lowe's or at a tool supplier. Those wear out pretty quick. I don't know why they don't last on PVC decking. I don't know if they clog, and there's not really a great way to clean them. If I've used a wire brush, I usually dole the rasp out. So for $8 to $10, I just buy a few at a time, and then I always have a nice edge to break with. My other way is I use a 1-inch Makita strip sander if I'm doing many feet, like 50, 60 feet, and I don't want to sit there and hand rasp it because it's hard on your back and your hands and you sweat, and you know, it's a lot of work. You're putting a lot of effort into it. I'll run the 1-inch strip sander along all those edges, and it gives it a very similar look. So those are the two ways I finish off my edges of my decks. I used to use a laminate trimmer and a router, but as PVC decking has changed, the core colors have changed, and I found it was breaking. Even with an 1/8 inch roundover bit, it was just putting too much out. It was taking too much out of the board, and I didn't like the finished look, and then we're painting all those edges, and it was just too much, so we stopped doing that. How to remove stripped out Cortex screws. Too many times I have them fail within 1/8 inch sticking up. Help! All right, so the way I do it is, one, I only use stainless steel screws when I'm running my Cortex screws. What you can do is you can find the stainless steel screws. You can use AZEK branded top lock screws, are the same screws that the carbon screws are in your Cortex kits. I know that's going to be a little more expensive than just buying a standard Cortex kit, and until Fasten Master sells a Cortex and stainless, then you're kind of stuck with all those Cortex screws. Either pre-drill all your holes and then run your Cortex, or I use stainless steel and I use AZEK, so we don't really have stripping problems like some of these other guys on Cap Composites do. We just ram jam and go. And if we do get a occasional stripped out screw, I use a screw extractor. Calvin got me one for Christmas one year, and I also have a couple of other sets in my toolkit, and you can find those at the home centers as well. And it's just a screw extraction kit, and it comes in 4 different sizes. It's like 20 bucks, comes in a little black case, so that's what I would use. Okay, here's a question. How do you do manhole covers? I assume you're talking about septic tank lids. There's several different ways we've done it. If you go through some of our old videos, you'll find explanations, or our Instagram page, and you'll see photographs. The coolest one I've ever done was we had to make we heat bent AZEK decking on a 13-inch radius, and then we use those as the trim pieces around the septic tank lids, and then I actually created a removable lid inside of that 13-inch radius, so it was like a 26-inch puck that pulled out, and then you're able to access the septic tank lids. Why no G-tape on the dock from the UK? Not calling you, just curious. Plus, like the work. We did not G-tape the last project. 2 reasons. 1, the client hired us to come in after the dock was framed and lay the decking, so we didn't put a budget together for G-tape. Anywhere that I had to add a flat block to create detail, I did G-tape the frame. But because it was raining so hard, the G-tape wasn't sticking, and it was making a big mess, so we abandoned that idea. It was just unfortunate, but I just couldn't handle it. It got really messy, so we decided not to do it. I live in New England. Do you need to go below the frost line for a large floating deck, 500 square foot or greater? If I were you, I would check your local building codes, because I don't live in New England, I live in Washington State. I've been told by other people on the East Coast, yes, you do have to go below the frost line, and usually a lot of those guys are using helical piles. I use a company called Masscore Helical Piles for my helical pile driving. Maybe you could consider contacting them and getting some information for you. How do you determine the number of footings needed for a 500 square foot or greater deck? I think if you don't know your loading, you don't know structure, you should consult a structural engineer. That's what I do when I'm not sure about a beam load or a span. So contact your local structural engineer or find one that you can bounce questions off of. Some are very reasonable, and they may or may not charge you for some simple questions, but then when you need them for all those critical estimating purposes or for when you're pulling building permits, they may come in really handy, so try to find one. Would you recommend specializing in a specific thing or do multiple things? Well, I basically build decks. I haven't gone off and tried to build houses or bathrooms or kitchens or remodels or anything like that. So in my opinion, you can specialize in one thing and do it really great and be well known for it. And if you're happy doing that particular item, great. If you need more spice in your life and one thing burns you out or wears you out, then I would consider doing multiple things. But it's not my specialty. I was never trained that way. I don't know anything but decks, so that's what I do. How's the weather, Doc? I think you're about to get hit with a Pineapple Express. Yeah, you ain't kidding me, man. We have gotten a lot of rain this year. Record-setting rain in January. It was like 12 inches or something like that. Just awful. I'm surprised that we haven't started having mudslides yet around this region. We have had a few near the railroad tracks on certain parts of high slope areas in the Puget Sound, but you know, that's one thing. The weather is really hard to deal with sometimes, but you just have to deal with it. It is what it is. Can you use HeatCon for cap composite decking? Yes, you can. We have successfully bent TimberTech products down to a 6-foot radius. It is much more of a challenge than PVC. It's very time consuming, and I would suggest that you enroll in Dr. Deck's Masterclass if you want to learn how to do it. There'll be a link to my Shopify page in the description of this video, so you can link on that and go check it out, Dr. Deck's Masterclass. Do you pour concrete piers extra deep when on a slope? Yes, you have to, because the rule of thumb is, well, if you're on a slope like this and you're digging a footing, and let's say it's a 45-degree angle, and you only dig so deep, if you're at the bottom of a hole and you draw an imaginary line on a 45-degree angle, if that 45-degree angle is going to blow out the side of the slope, then you're not deep enough. So you got to dig deeper so that on a 45-degree angle, that the imaginary line would not protrude outside of the hole. So, or protrude outside the side of the hill. If it does, then you got to go deeper. Do you prefer a freestanding deck, or do you like tying into the house? I like to tie into the house whenever possible. I think it's a much sturdier way to build a deck, because you already are relying on half of the load to be transferred to the house versus it all being transferred onto posts and beams. Okay guys, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and hit the bell icon to be notified when we're putting out new content. Also, leave some more questions below and we'll try to get them answered for you. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.